fooled my cheating soon-to-be ex-wife into believing that I was unfaithful, then executed a calculated exit strategy that culminated with her being served divorce papers on Christmas Day. Prepare yourself, as this narrative is quite extensive, spanning from late 2019 to the present week. All names within this account have been altered to protect identities. The backstory begins with my soon-to-be ex-wife, whom I shall refer to as Sue. She was my high school sweetheart. Our romance ignited in 1992 when we were both just 17 years old. Fast forward to the present, we are both 45 and have spent over 2 decades together. Sue is the only woman I have ever been intimate with in my life. We married 5 years later, right after I graduated college, at the age of 22. A year afterward, we welcomed our first child, followed by a second son a few years later. In total, we have navigated 23 years of marriage, during which I dedicated myself to her and our family, constructing a home and working tirelessly to provide the life she envisioned. Of course, like any couple, we encountered our share of difficulties. However, we managed to weather the storms together, continually emerging stronger and more united. This resilience made the revelation of her infidelity all the more shocking and painful. A pivotal moment occurred in March 2020 when I began to sense that something significant was amiss in our relationship. For about 2 months leading up to this realization, we had been in a particularly low emotional state. My struggle stemmed from a reconstructive knee surgery I had undergone after injuring my ACL in the fall of 2019. At that time, my knee had only about 55% of its normal range of motion, which severely limited my ability to contribute to household tasks. I was out on workers' compensation due to my workplace injury, leaving me unable to perform my usual responsibilities. While our sons did what they could around the house, many tasks that only I could manage were put on hold, creating additional strain on our family dynamics and particularly on Sue, who was understandably frustrated. Compounding these challenges was a significant downturn in our physical intimacy. Even prior to my injury, our sexual relationship had begun to slow, but during the months of my recovery, it completely halted. Around this time, Sue started spending more evenings socializing with her coworkers after hours. This became a routine from November 2019 through March 2020, but I initially paid little attention to it. Throughout the 23 years we had been together, I had no reason to doubt her loyalty or trustworthiness. She had her friendships, I had mine, and we also shared mutual friends. I would often go out with my friends, and there were never any issues or suspicions. However, starting in January 2020, I began to notice subtle changes in Sue's behavior. While the underlying tension in our relationship was obvious, her affection towards me diminished significantly. The usual embraces and kisses that had once been a staple of our relationship became rare. Additionally, her attachment to her phone intensified. It was always in her hand, yet she became increasingly secretive about its contents. Previously, she had been eager to share various things she discovered online, DIY projects, recipes on Pinterest, amusing memes. Now, she seemed to guard her phone closely, and her interactions with me turned more curt, as if I were a burden. By March 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic had hit New York City hard, and we were plunged into lockdown. Both of our careers were deemed essential, which spared us from working from home. After 5 long months of rehabilitation, I was finally cleared to return to work, and I approached this news with eagerness. The physical inactivity had left me restless, as I am an avid martial artist with a routine that usually involves training in the gym 4 days a week, in addition to tackling various home improvement projects. Shortly after the lockdown commenced, Sue informed me that she was expected to put in extra hours at her job again. Initially, I didn't think much of it, assuming the additional hours would be sporadic. To my surprise, however, she began working extra hours every day, sometimes coming home 3 or more hours later than expected. When she did arrive home, she would head straight for the shower, spending only a brief moment connecting with me and a little time with our youngest son, who was still living at home, before retreating to bed. As I grew more comfortable moving about with my knee, we made attempts to rekindle our intimacy. However, it became clear that she was not mentally or emotionally engaged during these moments. As the situation grew more strained, my suspicions about her fidelity began to solidify. It was becoming evident that the woman I had committed my life to was drifting farther and farther away from me. By early April, it became increasingly clear to me that something was amiss. The mounting signs all pointed to a troubling conclusion: she was likely engaged in an affair. This realization prompted me to seek answers, leading me on a detailed investigation into the behaviors indicative of infidelity in a partner. As I researched, I discovered that she seemed to be exhibiting nearly all the telltale signs of unfaithfulness. My initial inquiries progressed into a focused search for concrete proof. I turned my attention to her social media accounts, particularly her Facebook. Going through her posts from the previous months revealed the standard images of our family, photos of outings with our sons, and a number of snapshots featuring her with various friends. However, what truly caught my eye were the numerous pictures documenting her nights out with colleagues. Among these images, I began to notice a consistent presence, one particular guy who appeared in nearly every photo, positioned uncomfortably close to her. His arm was frequently draped around her shoulders or his hand rested low on her back, far too intimate for someone I had never met. The discomfort I felt grew even more pronounced upon discovering that this individual was on her Facebook friends list. Curiosity compelled me to search for his account, but to my dismay, I found myself blocked. The knowledge that he could communicate with her while I was shut out raised alarm bells. It was evident to me that my suspicions were not unfounded, igniting a determination within me to uncover the full scope of their involvement. I transitioned into what felt like a detective mode, fully aware of the reality I was facing. Throughout April and May, I dedicated myself to this pursuit. I had no prior understanding of the depths of information that could be extracted from mobile phone records, text messages, and emails. Fortunately, we shared a family cell phone plan, which allowed me to access a wealth of data. Analyzing her call and text history revealed a striking pattern. The two most frequently contacted numbers over the period from October 2019 to April 2020 were mine and one I did not recognize. After a quick search, I confirmed that this unknown number belonged to the same man from the photos. Let's refer to him as P. At this point, the situation became increasingly dire. Much of the messaging between them appeared fragmented, suggesting that she was likely deleting key communications. While I had become convinced of her infidelity, a definitive piece of evidence remained elusive. I decided to confide in my best friend about my findings. When he inquired whether I had confronted her, I hesitated, explaining that the evidence I had didn't feel like enough to initiate a confrontation. It was then that he suggested a particular application designed to monitor her communications in real time. After installing the app and syncing it with my data plan, I waited, anticipating some kind of breakthrough. Within days, I struck gold. I stumbled upon a text exchange between her and P, detailing the enjoyable time they shared the previous night and making plans to repeat the experience that coming weekend. The weight of that realization struck me like a ton of bricks. It felt as if I had received an emotional gut punch. This moment could easily be pinpointed as my D-Day. In the 2 days that followed, I was engulfed in a profound sense of devastation. I instinctively distanced myself from her during this time, and her noticeable concern did little to alleviate my turmoil. When she asked what was wrong, I would dismiss her questions and leave the room. I found myself unable to look at her. This was the same woman to whom I had devoted 23 years of my life, giving everything I had to our marriage. The thought that she could step outside of our vows with someone merely 5 years older than our eldest son cut deep. By the third day, my sorrow began to morph into anger. I reached out to my friend, Oz, to share that my suspicions were indeed confirmed. When he asked if I had confronted her yet, I replied in the negative, voicing a burning desire for retribution. I did not simply want to end our marriage, I yearned to dismantle her world, to leave her life in chaos and ruin, exacting my own form of justice for the betrayal I had endured. The process ahead was not going to be swift, and I needed a structured approach. My extensive readings and research on infidelity led me to a particular quote that struck a chord with me: "The enemy of infidelity is unpredictability." This principle would lay the groundwork for my strategic plan. I intended to make her existence a relentless turmoil while simultaneously orchestrating my own exit strategy from the relationship. By early June, the app one had installed remained on my device, and each night I meticulously gathered data. Observing their exchanges revealed the depth of their connection. It was unmistakably a full-fledged relationship characterized by sexting, romantic messages, and intimate photos. The absurdity of the situation was overwhelming, yet I chose to stop scrutinizing the details of their conversations. Instead, I cataloged the information quietly on my private server, ensuring that I had a comprehensive record of their interactions. Simultaneously, I began to alter my routine. I would venture out at unconventional hours and return home substantially later than she did. In her presence, I became increasingly preoccupied with my phone, a stark deviation from my previous behavior. Whenever she inquired about my activities, would simply respond with vague replies like, "just stuff," and put my phone away, fostering an air of mystery. Furthermore, I took precautionary measures by changing my login credentials across all my accounts to prevent her from accessing my personal information. Throughout our marriage, transparency had been paramount, but it seemed that this was no longer the case. Shortly after I suspected her affair had begun, she changed the password to her Facebook account in her phone, claiming it was a necessary action due to recent security breaches. It was painfully ironic to witness her employing this excuse as a cover for hiding her betrayal. I gradually confided in my plan to a select few individuals, including my older sister and two of my closest friends, whom I trusted implicitly. These were people who had stood by me through life's challenges. My friendship with Oz, which had been cultivated since childhood, was particularly significant. Similarly, Joey and Na had been my companions since high school. It is essential to note Na, as she would play an important role later. As July unfolded, my soon-to-be ex-wife slipped deeper into a state of paranoia. She began reaching out to me more frequently through texts and calls, inquiring about my whereabouts and whether I would be home when she arrived. The frequency of her questions intensified, revealing her growing anxiety. I could sense the seeds of doubt I had planted earlier were starting to take root, especially in her communication with P, whom she confided in regarding her suspicions and confusion. She expressed to him her feelings of coldness and distance from me, which filled me with a mix of disbelief and amusement. The sheer audacity of her actions was almost comical, given the circumstances. During these interactions with P, she even suggested that they should avoid meeting at our home, citing her uncertainty about when I might show up. This admission confirmed her blatant betrayal, as it became evident that she was hosting this affair in our shared space. When P provocatively questioned her about whether she was concerned that I might be cheating on her, her response was one of indignation. The irony was rich. I found immense satisfaction in witnessing her frustration as she argued with her affair partner over her unfounded fears of my potential infidelity. It is crucial to highlight that, during this time, I was not engaging in any romantic entanglements myself. My evenings were spent with Oz or Joey, relaxing with drinks, watching fights, and enjoying camaraderie. Occasionally, I would visit my sister and her husband, who had become a brotherly figure in my life. While my sister was aware of my ex-wife's infidelity, I had chosen not to disclose my plan to her husband, knowing he had a tendency to share information indiscriminately. As October approached, the intensity of the situation escalated. For 3 months, I had been executing my facade of an affair, and Sue was becoming acutely aware of my growing detachment from her. The span of time since I had shared any intimacy with her stretched uncomfortably long. It had been since the beginning of my plan that I had not even hugged her, kissed her, or initiated any form of affection. Ironically, she seemed to remain preoccupied with her encounters with P, often at his place or at motels. Then, on the afternoon of October 20th, something shifted. She called me at work, a gesture that had become rare amidst the chaos that had ensued. With an unfamiliar urgency, she asked me to come straight home after my shift, an unexpected request that set the stage for the confrontation that was about to unfold. She arrived home from work one evening, her demeanor more serious than usual, immediately expressing that she had something important to discuss with me. In that moment, I couldn't suppress the nagging doubt in my mind. Part of me anticipated that she might finally confess to her infidelity. However, to my surprise, she didn't take that route. Instead, she confronted me with a question that caught me off guard, asking whether I was unhappy in our relationship. The audacity of her words struck me. She went on to cite various reasons for her concerns: how I had been spending an excessive amount of time away from home, how I seemed to have withdrawn my affection from her, and how, according to her, our intimate life had withered away completely. As she spoke, she expressed a worry that I was pushing her away, stemming from feelings of resentment due to how she had treated me during the months I was rehabilitating my knee. Then came the moment that made me burst with laughter. She gasped and asked if I was cheating on her. The irony of her accusation sent me into a fit of hysterical laughter, the kind one might expect from a scene in a dark comedy, where the absurdity of the situation takes hold completely. I fell to the floor, howling with a glee tinged with madness, while she likely interpreted my laughter as a dismissal of her concerns. In reality, I was laughing at the profound irony of her question, tears streaming down my face as I pounded the floor in uncontrollable fits. After a couple of minutes, I managed to gather myself enough to look her in the eyes for the first time in months, shaking my head in a silent response, choosing not to provide her with any words. Instead, I stood up, brushed myself off, and leaned down to kiss the top of her head, subtly shifting my focus to the evening as I settled in. Later that night, while sitting in my office, an urge to delve deeper into her feelings compelled me to check the messaging app on my phone. I discovered that she was, in fact, texting someone in real time. My heart raced as I read her messages. She confided in her friend that she believed I was cheating on her, detailing how I had laughed in her face when she confronted me about it. She claimed I was indifferent to her feelings, lamenting that I had changed so profoundly that she felt I was slipping away from her. The words she typed echoed with a sense of desperation and self-awareness, noting that she sensed this was karma for her actions. As I absorbed her sorrow, the smile on my face likely resembled that of the Cheshire Cat, reveling in the justice of the moment. Her friend attempted to console her, arguing that if I had truly cared for her, she wouldn't have sought solace in someone else. Yet, the tone of her responses suggested she was filled with uncertainty, grappling with the realization that her infidelity had consequences. All the while, she had the audacity to step outside the boundaries of our marriage during the time I was incapacitated due to a legitimate injury. Now, it seemed that the fear of losing me to another woman was causing her to falter in her resolve. It was a fitting display of weakness, a reflection of her actions. At the same time, I was meticulously executing the next phase of my plan for retribution. In September, I had taken the significant step of consulting with a family attorney to initiate the process of divorce, armed with a substantial collection of evidence of her unfaithfulness. Since New York operates as an at-fault state in divorce proceedings, the overwhelming proof I had gathered positioned me favorably to hold her accountable in a court of law. My lawyer advised me to ensure my financial matters were in order in anticipation of asset division, prompting me to take additional precautions. I discreetly transferred all funds from our joint account to my personal account, solidifying my financial independence. Simultaneously, I began searching for an apartment as part of my strategy moving forward. Fast forward to November, and my behavior had not only remained unchanged, but I had escalated my actions. Enter Nina, an important figure in this unfolding drama. For context, Nina had never been particularly close with my wife, Sue. I had met Nina during my freshman year of high school, well before my relationship with Sue began, and from the very start, Sue regarded Nina as a potential threat. It was clear that Sue harbored an unspoken distrust toward Nina, a dynamic that had persisted throughout our relationship. Conversely, Nina had never warmed to Sue, particularly noting how my wife seemed to impose herself on our established circle of friends, a stark contrast to my efforts not to intrude into her social sphere. This ongoing tension fueled the complexity of my situation as I navigated the aftermath of betrayal and plotted my next moves. Na had a set of friends that often irked her, primarily because she was acutely aware of Sue's motivations behind their actions. Even within Sue's social circle, which was noticeably devoid of male friends except for P, Na stood out as the only woman in my immediate group of friends, often referred to as my square. For an extended period, Na had been stuck overseas due to the pandemic, but she finally returned to New York City on November 3rd. In celebration of her homecoming, Oz, Joey, and I decided to organize a small gathering at Joey's house, where we could enjoy dinner and drinks. The group was limited to just 5 people, Oz, Joey, Joey's wife, who also happened to be Nina's sister, Na, and myself. We were vigilant about adhering to CDC guidelines, taking the ongoing health crisis very seriously. In what could only be described as an underhanded but clever move, Na, with her mischievous tendencies, devised a scheme to provoke Sue. She proposed that we take some photographs reminiscent of the images I had discovered months earlier featuring Sue and P, and post them on my Facebook account. Without hesitation, we followed through with Na's plan, and it wasn't until the 5th day that Sue caught wind of our antics. I could only speculate that several friends of ours noticed my updates and became aware of how close Na and I appeared in those photos. This clearly sent Sue into a mental spiral, as she was still convinced that I was being unfaithful. The tension mounted, and I could almost guarantee that she was itching to confront Na, but she was restrained by the knowledge that Na had spent the majority of the year away in Europe. That evening, Sue didn't hesitate to reprimand me for what she labeled as overly affectionate behavior in the photos. This moment presented me with a golden opportunity to strike back. I took a deep breath and responded with, "So what about the pictures of you and P from last year? He was certainly handsy in those, but did you see me getting upset over it?" The look on her face was one of sheer disbelief. It was the first time I had ever mentioned P's name throughout this entire ordeal. I could almost see the wheels turning in her mind as she scrambled to rationalize those photos. Up to that point, she had been unaware that I had seen them, highlighting just how little I used Facebook. When I did post something, it often garnered significant attention, which explained the traction that the pictures with Nina received within our social circles. Her attempt to deflect was evident as she insisted that P was just a friendly guy and that such behavior was typical for him. "I can understand how it may appear," she stammered, "but there's nothing going on. I'm sorry if those photos hurt you, I can delete them." I replied, "No, it's not the pictures that hurt me. What truly hurts is the knowledge that you've been with him for a year while telling me you were working extra hours and hanging out with friends." This was my moment of reckoning, as Lieutenant C. Worf from Star Trek, The Next Generation famously said, "Vengeance is a dish best served cold." Following that night, Sue became unusually clingy and attentive towards me in a manner that was increasingly annoying. She sought to initiate affection and intimacy at every turn, while I continued to maintain my emotional distance, effectively stonewalling her advances. All the while, I meticulously documented her conversations with P. By this stage, I had long since become numb to any lingering desire to salvage our marriage. I had checked out the moment I set my plan into motion. Sue confided in P, expressing her anguish over our deteriorating relationship, admitting that she felt I hated her. Then, without warning, she dropped a bombshell. She could no longer see P because the guilt was overwhelming, and she feared losing me. She claimed to love P deeply but insisted that she was still in love with me and needed to save our marriage before it was too late. I thought to myself, "No, my dear, you're about 8 months too late for that." P, in his typical fashion, expressed his affection for her, professing that he loved her differently than I did, arguing that she was making a monumental mistake in choosing to leave him for me. This text exchange would mark the end of their communication until about 3 weeks ago. Through the remainder of November and into December, Sue remained trapped in a state of uncertainty. She was desperately trying to decipher my state of mind while grappling with her own doubts about whether I was being unfaithful. Meanwhile, P relentlessly bombarded her with messages daily, yet she refused to respond. I observed her checking her phone often, only to quickly stash it away. At this juncture, phase 2 of my plan was officially complete. I had finalized the divorce papers and found a studio apartment to start anew. In Co-op City, I secured a studio apartment, a decision that marked a significant shift in my life. The locals, particularly New Yorkers familiar with the area, would recognize the significance of this choice. I signed a 2-year lease, and at that point, all of my financial resources were tied up in my personal account, preparing for a new chapter. This time in my life felt charged with potential, and I was ready to make bold moves. As Thanksgiving approached, my oldest son and his girlfriend decided to host a small gathering that included our immediate family members. This gathering brought together my oldest son, his girlfriend, her parents, since she was an only child, myself, my other son, Sue, and a few close relatives. The evening unfolded beautifully, marked by laughter and warmth. My oldest son's girlfriend, an aspiring chef, took charge of the culinary efforts and prepared an impressive spread. Her talent in the kitchen was evident, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride for her accomplishments. While the atmosphere was festive, I was navigating my own underlying tensions between Sue and me. To maintain appearances and avoid raising suspicions among the family members present, including my sons and my oldest son's girlfriend's parents, I initiated gestures of affection toward Sue. I leaned in for kisses on her cheek, offered her tight hugs, and even wrapped my arms around her shoulders from behind. These moments were not lost on her. She visibly enjoyed the attention. It was important to note that this was my first physical contact with Sue since that fateful night in October when she confronted me about our struggles, marking a significant gap of nearly 2 months. Truth be told, I felt a wave of repulsion as I engaged in these gestures, but I understood the necessity of maintaining a facade for the sake of the evening. I could not afford to sabotage the delicate balance of my plan with any overt signs of discord. As the night progressed, my youngest son decided to spend the night with his older brother, which left Sue and me to make the drive home together. During that drive, she expressed her gratitude for the way I had been treating her, saying, "I don't know what you're going through, baby, but I'm here for you." Her words almost triggered a fit of maniacal laughter within me, but I managed to suppress it, instead responding with, "I know, I just need time." That night marked a turning point in a much deeper sense. It was the first time in a long while, since spring, that we shared a connection, albeit under strange circumstances. I decided that with the course I was set on taking, I might as well get some fleeting physical gratification before severing ties completely. I won't delve into the specifics, but the encounter was devoid of love. Afterward, I left her, feeling as if I had exhausted her emotionally. She lay there, disoriented and vulnerable, as I quietly got up, took a shower, and retreated to my office for the night, leaving her in complete confusion. This time, I exercised caution, using a condom for the first time in 2 decades, a fact that bewildered her. Still, she did not pry for an explanation. Perhaps she sensed the nature of our relationship had irrevocably changed. After all, she had been physically involved with someone else for months, a reality I was not ready to confront fully. The following morning, I checked my spy app, an essential tool I had relied upon, and for the first time in weeks, there was a response from her lover, P. His message was dramatic. He professed his love for her and claimed she had wasted enough time trying to rekindle a flame with me that had long since extinguished. He painted a picture of her life with me as a confinement, stating that she had spent 23 years in a prison and deserved to experience genuine love and affection. The irony that he was merely 27 years old, just 5 years older than our eldest son, did not escape me. This young man, enamored with a 45-year-old married mother of 2, had the audacity to suggest she should leave the life we had built together for his fleeting affection. She responded to his overtures much as she had in their prior conversations. She reassured him of her love while stating that I was still the love of her life and emphasized that she didn't want to lose me, but would always have a place for him in her heart. In a moment of weakness, she agreed to meet him one last time, a decision that echoed my own actions from the previous night. As I continued gathering information for the archives I had painstakingly compiled, I marked December 4th as the day when the third phase of my plan, dubbed Operation Shinobi Ghost, would commence. I held the divorce papers in my hand and had already established my new living arrangements. Before I could fully commit to the process of pulling my life apart, I needed to inform my sons about the impending changes. That Friday night, I called my oldest son to the house. I asked him to join me in my office, where I prepared to lay the heavy truth on the table. I didn't delve into the sordid details, but I did reveal that their mother had been unfaithful for over a year and that I would be filing for divorce soon. The impact of my words struck my 17-year-old son particularly hard, leaving him visibly shaken and grappling with emotions he could hardly comprehend. Shaken by the revelation of infidelity, he found himself grappling with feelings that were all too familiar. Just 4 months earlier, he had endured the pain of betrayal when his first girlfriend had cheated on him. The heartbreak from that experience had not yet dulled, and now the prospect of his own mother being capable of such betrayal struck him with an intensity that was hard to bear. The weight of this realization hit him hard, reviving feelings of vulnerability and disillusionment. In contrast, his oldest son seemed to handle the situation with a level of maturity that surprised him. After taking a moment to process, his son suggested a practical solution. His younger brother could move in with him until the situation with their mother calmed down. Appreciating this offer, he agreed, recognizing that it was a necessary step for the stability of their family. They quickly packed some of the younger son's belongings. As they prepared for the transition, the older son expressed concern for his father's well-being, asking if he would be okay during this turbulent time. The father's response was reassuring, infused with a desire to maintain morale amid chaos. He replied, "Yes, son, I'm going to be all right, and so are you. We're going to be all right, I promise." With that affirmation, the two boys left, taking a significant step toward protecting themselves and each other. It was a relief to have made this decision, but the most challenging part of the upheaval was now behind him. The next phase entailed meticulously planning a strategy to confront the impending fallout. Over the following weeks, he worked diligently to gather his most sensitive belongings and documentation from the house. His older son, whom he affectionately called Oz, was instrumental in this process. They created a list of essential items that needed to be retrieved discreetly while their mother, Sue, remained unaware. He gifted Oz the spare key to the house, enabling him to walk in and out as necessary, ensuring that each piece of evidence was collected without raising any suspicions. He was meticulous in his planning. He supplied Oz with items that Sue would likely not notice were missing unless someone explicitly pointed them out. Meanwhile, he took further precautions for his own safety and privacy by acquiring a new phone and changing his number. He communicated this new contact information to a select few: Oz, his other son, his daughter, and his mother, ensuring that he could maintain essential connections without being exposed. Despite the brewing storm, he kept up appearances with Sue, carefully maintaining the facade of normalcy. He fed her small doses of affection to divert her attention and keep her from growing suspicious, even while she continued her communications with her paramour, an emotional entanglement that lingered. However, he could sense that the fog of their relationship was beginning to lift, making way for the truth he was meticulously collecting. Over time, he amassed an extensive archive of all the evidence related to Sue's affair. Every relevant detail, including call logs, text messages, photographs, and emails, was systematically compiled. He invested substantial resources into this endeavor, spending over $1,500 on printing supplies, including ink, paper, and binders, as he organized everything in chronological order. When he finished compiling the evidence, he prepared the final touches by placing the printed documents into 14 binders. Each binder was carefully packed into boxes, wrapped as gifts, and addressed to various recipients, including his mother, her parents, his 2 sisters, his brother, and the Human Resources Department of the company where Sue worked, where there was a strict policy against inter-office relationships. He also included a few of Sue's close friends among the recipients to ensure that the word of her indiscretion spread. On December 16th, he took all the packages to the post office and shipped them out, with an estimated delivery date for December 22nd to 24th, perfectly timed to coincide with the holiday season. As Christmas Eve arrived, he watched with a mix of anticipation and dread as Sue returned home around her usual time. Uncertain whether she had seen her paramour recently, he had stopped tracking her movements 2 days prior, feeling confident that he had gathered the necessary information. Just as he had done on many occasions before, he engaged with her casually. She showered and then spent some time with him before they engaged in intimate relations on the living room couch. He was acutely aware of the paradox of their situation, feeling both guilty and vindicated. Later that night, after she had gone to bed, the moment he had been preparing for since June finally arrived. Waking in the middle of the night, he took the final steps in his meticulously laid plan. He grabbed one of the last 3 binders filled with evidence and slipped the divorce papers inside, sealing his intentions. He placed it on his side of the bed with a note that simply read, "Merry Christmas." Alongside it, he left his old phone and a business card from his lawyer, marking a definitive shift in his life. He packed up the last of his essential belongings, filling 2 backpacks with items he couldn't bear to leave behind. In that moment of finality, he exited his home of 23 years for the last time. He had successfully gone off the grid, disappearing from Sue's life entirely. He blocked her on social media, yet she had not reciprocated, which allowed him to monitor the fallout of his departure. He witnessed the chaos unfold from a distance with a sense of satisfaction. His packages had been delivered, and the revelations contained within them were wreaking havoc on her life. Sue's youngest sister confronted her with palpable anger, while both her parents expressed their disapproval and disappointment. Even his own mother unleashed her wrath upon Sue, verbally dismantling her with a ferocity that left him in awe. As Sue faced the consequences of her actions, she frantically searched for him, attempting to. Desperation has gripped her as she attempts to reach out to me. I can only assume she realizes that I am likely searching for information regarding our situation. However, I am resolute in my decision not to engage with her in any conversation without my lawyer present. The next time I share the same space with her will only be in the presence of legal counsel. She finds herself at a significant disadvantage. There is no way for her to manipulate the narrative to frame me as the antagonist. I have taken steps to ensure that the individuals who matter to her are fully aware of her actions and intentions. According to a mutual friend who works in the same company as her, both she and her current partner are facing administrative leave starting tomorrow. This development brings a sense of relief, as it appears likely she will enter 2021 without a job. Regarding the final 2 binders of evidence I've collected, one has already been handed over to my lawyer. This constitutes my last piece of evidence for the upcoming divorce proceedings. The last binder, however, I have placed in my storage unit with the intent to destroy it in Joey's fire pit once the divorce is finalized. Do I feel any guilt about these actions? Absolutely not. Throughout our 23 years together, I made every effort to support this woman. I provided her with the home she desired, the family she longed for, and the life we both envisioned together. My love for her was unconditional. I never wavered, strayed, or even contemplated the idea of breaking my vows. Whenever issues arose that I believed could jeopardize our marriage, I communicated openly with her, and we endeavored to resolve them collaboratively. Unfortunately, she chose to seek comfort in another man's arms rather than address her dissatisfaction with our intimate life. She opted to engage with a younger man who ignited feelings within her, leaving me with no sympathy for her plight. As far as I am concerned, she is now irrelevant to my life. She can suffer the consequences of her actions. The most significant losses I face are my house, my car, and perhaps a few $100s a month in alimony. However, considering the divorce is being filed under the statute of adultery in New York State, with ample evidence supporting my case, I may not even be held accountable for alimony. From my perspective, she has become a ghost, and I have no intention of looking back. It's worth noting that New York state law allows for a divorce to be filed under fault conditions. My lawyer has assured me that my circumstances fall under this category. Tomorrow, I will meet with my soon-to-be ex-wife and her lawyer. I anticipate that this meeting will be pivotal. An update on my situation: I successfully deceived my unfaithful soon-to-be ex-wife into believing I was involved with someone else. This manipulation culminated in me serving her divorce papers on Christmas Day. That day marked my first full day in my new apartment, still in the early stages of being furnished, but I have begun to make it a home, knowing I will be here for at least the next 2 years. My sons, along with my eldest son's girlfriend, came over to spend quality time with me. She brought delicious treats she had prepared and crafted a lovely meal for us. This gathering allowed me to connect with my sons in a meaningful way, something I had not done in a long while. My sister also joined us, bringing additional goodies and spending time together. It was particularly special for her, as it had been nearly a year since she had seen her nephews. Having everyone gathered around me lifted my spirits significantly. I realized that if I had been alone, I might have resorted to excessive drinking to numb my feelings. As the evening drew to a close around 8, I decided to visit Joey and his wife, Claudia. We spent a couple of hours together, enjoying some drinks and camaraderie before I returned home. The next significant development occurred on December 29, 2020, around midday when I received a text from Nina asking if I had plans that night. I wasn't busy, so we agreed to meet up after work. She arrived, and we headed to a diner nearby, where indoor dining was permitted at 25% capacity due to the ongoing pandemic. Fortunately, finding a seat was not an issue, as many people are still cautious about dining out. Once seated and settled, Nina laid all her cards on the table. I had anticipated this conversation. She confessed that she had feelings for me that date back to our teenage years but never had the chance to express them because Sue had gotten to me first. Since Sue came into my life and quickly took me under her wing, it's important to note the context of my relationships. I've known Na for a couple of years longer than Sue, and she has played a significant role as the fourth point in the social dynamic that includes myself, Oz, and Joey. Back in high school, we were considered social outcasts, part of the raver subculture, and we never quite fit into the various cliques that dominated our school environment. At that time, Na struggled with her weight and dealt with diabetes, while she was known as the heavyset goth girl who exuded coolness but rarely received any attention from the boys. Nevertheless, there was a palpable chemistry between us that was undeniable. Fast forward to the present day, Na has transformed her life and is now a personal trainer and yoga instructor. She epitomizes the classic story of the ugly duckling who blossomed into a stunning swan. It's an incredible transformation that attests to her hard work and determination. Recently, we made the decision that following the finalization of my divorce, we would start exploring a romantic relationship. The evening we decided to take that leap together was memorable. I took Na back to my new place, and we shared an unforgettable night of connection and intimacy. I have no shame in embracing that experience. In many ways, Na has proven to be a more valuable friend to me than Sue ever was. That isn't to diminish Sue's place in my life, as she was my best friend for many years, but Na's unwavering support has been profound. Throughout our quarter-century friendship, Na has consistently been there for me. On one occasion, she even set aside her own feelings to allow me the space to pursue a relationship with Sue. This level of selflessness is what I believe embodies true love and friendship. While it may sound like I'm trying to rationalize my decision in my own mind, I firmly believe that my choice to be with Na was the right one, and I am committed to exploring where this new chapter may lead us. Now, shifting focus to yesterday, it marked the day I met with my soon-to-be ex-wife and her attorney to discuss the details of our impending divorce. It has been 2 weeks since I decided to cut off communication with my soon-to-be ex-wife, STBXW, and just this past Monday, I received a call from my attorney indicating that Sue's lawyer had arranged a meeting for us to cover the terms of the divorce on January 6, 2021. This was the very meeting I attended. On Tuesday morning, I met with my lawyer to lay out the terms I was seeking. To keep it succinct, my goal was an uncontested divorce based on grounds of marital neglect attributed to Sue. I requested a complete division of our assets, along with the sale of my half of the house to her, allowing her to take full ownership. We also agreed that we would retain our respective vehicles, and I would keep my cabin in the Poconos. Given the circumstances surrounding the marital neglect claims, I insisted that she would not receive any spousal support from me. Additionally, my son, whom I refer to as 17 moving forward, would be free to choose where he wanted to live after the divorce, which I anticipated would likely be with me. On Wednesday, I arrived at my lawyer's office dressed in my best Johnny Cash attire, ready to confront the situation. During the meeting, Sue appeared quite distressed, which was evident as she struggled to maintain her composure. I adopted a stoic demeanor, choosing not to show any signs of weakness. I will forego the specific legal discussions, but when her attorney proposed an offer for terms of reconciliation, I was quick to reject it, hardly allowing her to finish detailing the proposal. Ultimately, we reached an agreement for a legal separation that would lead to an uncontested divorce. The only adjustment to my initial terms was that I would provide her with a temporary spousal support payment of $653 a month to help cover her utility costs until she finds gainful employment again, especially after she lost her job under less than favorable circumstances about a year ago. Financially, I am in a position where this arrangement won't strain me, and she has enough savings to sustain herself for a significant period. Once a full calendar year has elapsed following the finalization of the divorce, she will no longer receive support, and that feels like a small price to pay for freedom from the relationship. With the process expected to take about 3 months, I anticipate that by early April, barring any complications, I will be entirely free of her. After the meeting, my lawyer provided me with some final remarks, assuring me he would keep me updated on the progress of the filing. Stepping back onto the street, I was approached by Sue, who asked if we could have a conversation. I felt it was only fair to hear her out, especially considering she managed to hold herself together throughout the meeting. However, once we were outside, she allowed her emotions to flow freely, apologizing profusely for her actions and expressing her regret over the circumstances that led us to this point. She expressed her regret, stating that she never intended for things to escalate to this point. She admitted that she never imagined she would fall in love with someone else, specifically PA. It was a painful awakening for her when she realized how terrible it was to betray her husband in such a profound manner, particularly when she suspected infidelity on my part. In a moment of vulnerability, she asked if I could ever find it within myself to forgive her. She suggested that perhaps, given some time, we might be able to start anew. It was clear that the thought of a future without me was unfathomable to her. In response, I told her that she needed to envision a life without me because, after this moment, I would no longer be in her life. I emphasized that our son, at 17, was nearing adulthood and capable of making his own choices regarding his life and future. I poured out my feelings, reminding her that I had dedicated half of my life to her, loving her unconditionally. Yet, in her own words, she chose to fall in love with another man. I firmly asserted that there was no possibility of forgiveness from me. The love I had for her had been gradually extinguished during the months she chose to confide her affection to PA instead of addressing her issues with me directly. I confessed that I missed the person she once was, but the woman standing before me filled me with anger and disappointment. I made it clear that if we were to part ways now, it would be too soon for me. As we stood on the sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan, her tears turned into a visible scene, drawing the attention of passers-by who glanced our way. Yet, at that moment, their opinions mattered little to me. I had already dismantled much of her public reputation, socially and professionally, but I needed to express the last remnants of my feelings for her. I concluded by stating that I did not regret the 23 years spent as her husband. Instead, I regretted that she chose the easiest option instead of confronting our problems. I remarked, almost pointedly, that I had those lovely sons of __ on Reddit to thank for a certain realization that moved me to utter. For 23 years, I thought she was mine, but it turned out it was just my turn. With that, I put in my rake-ins, turned my back on her, and walked away. Later that night, her father called, offering his apologies. He praised me for being a good man to his daughter and expressed his shame over her actions, stating he had raised her better. I felt a twinge of sorrow at this acknowledgement. I had come to see him as a father figure since my own father passed away years ago. However, I could not envision a future relationship with anyone from her family after this incident. In a symbolic gesture of closure, I changed my relationship status on Facebook to divorced, even though the paperwork was not finalized. To me, it felt as though it was already resolved. Given that I treat any social media announcement as a significant event, many friends reached out via Messenger, prompting me to explain that I had filed for divorce from Sue earlier that day. The shock on Nina's face was evident when she called me, surprised that I had taken such decisive action so quickly. It was clear to her that I had already been in the process before our earlier conversation, but she had no idea how advanced it was. I invited Nina over, and she accepted immediately. Our physical connection reignited, and for the first time in a long while, we spent the night together, lying in bed and talking until the early morning hours. That sense of relief and deep connection was something I had not experienced in quite some time. Ever since she confided her feelings to me, she dominated my thoughts. Some might criticize my quick transition into a new relationship, but to me, my marriage ended the moment Sue crossed a line with PA. I am ready to move on. My divorce is in progress, and I look forward to starting a new chapter with Nina. Earlier, I mentioned in a comment that I might never marry again, but that was before Nina revealed her own feelings. I cannot deny that I share those sentiments. We plan to take things slowly and will not be making any announcements until my divorce from Sue is legally completed. As for Sue, I genuinely have no concern for what happens to her. She can choose to move PA into our former home for all I care. I have reached a point where I am set to receive the payments for the house I am selling in the course of 2021, structured in 4 quarterly installments. In addition to this arrangement, I will be transferring $653 each month directly into her savings account. Once this financial commitment is fulfilled, I will have no further obligation to see or communicate with her. The overwhelming support, encouragement, and praise I have received during this challenging time have been invaluable, and I extend my heartfelt gratitude to everyone involved. Recently, my soon-to-be ex-wife, who I have been married to for 23 years, attempted to end her life last night. The unfortunate events in my life continue to unfold. I have been processing all of this for several hours and found it necessary to share my experience in this forum, as it seems most fitting. For those looking for additional context, my post history contains more details regarding the situation. To summarize briefly, I discovered that my wife, who is 45 years old, was engaged in an affair with a 27-year-old coworker. We have 2 sons, aged 22 and 17. In response to her betrayal, I devised a meticulous plan to significantly disrupt her life. This plan involved creating the illusion that I was also having an affair. I maintained this ruse for over 4.5 months, all the while gathering evidence of her infidelity, preparing divorce papers, and planning my exit strategy. I gradually relocated my personal belongings from our shared home to a new apartment, acquired a new phone and number, and separated my share of our finances from our joint account. On December 16, 2020, I compiled extensive proof of her affair, meticulously organized and printed it out in 14 binders. I chose to gift wrap 11 of these binders and sent them to the people who were significant in her life, as well as her HR department, with an expected delivery date between December 22 and December 24, 2020. On Christmas Eve, while she was asleep, I took one of the remaining 3 binders and included a divorce notice inside the cover. This binder was left on my side of the bed, where she had previously laid her head, along with my old phone and my lawyer's business card, effectively ghosting her from that moment forward. In the following days, her life unraveled dramatically. Family members distanced themselves from her, friends who were unaware of her infidelity ostracized her, and my mother confronted her with harsh words that cut deeply. Both she and her lover faced professional consequences, as they were placed on administrative leave and later terminated from their positions. Last week, we had our divorce hearing, which resulted in a legal separation that transitioned into an uncontested divorce, including provisions for transitional income given her current unemployment status. I am required to cover $653 per month for utilities until she either secures a job or up to 1 year after the divorce is finalized, which is anticipated to occur in 3 months. She will retain the house, her car, and half of our shared assets, while I keep my vehicles, motorcycle, boat, and my vacation cabin in the Poconos. After the hearing, we exchanged final words, where she attempted to justify her infidelity and implored me for a second chance after the divorce. I unequivocally rejected her plea, said what I needed to say, and walked away from her for good. This brings us to last night. Only my closest friends, my sons, their older sister, and my mother have my new contact information. I have completely blocked my soon-to-be ex-wife from all social media platforms, ensuring she has had no means of contacting me since I left her on Christmas Eve. However, some of our mutual friends remain in touch with her. Last night, while relaxing in my apartment, I received a voice call notification on Messenger from one of those mutual friends, one of the few who had not turned away from her since the affair came to light. She wasted no time in informing me that she had gone to check on my soon-to-be ex-wife and found her unconscious in the bedroom, foaming at the mouth, with 2 empty pill bottles beside her. She has since been admitted to the ICU, where she is in critical but stable condition. According to the doctor, she is likely to survive but will undoubtedly struggle with the aftermath of this event. She fervently pleaded for me to come, reflecting the deep turmoil of her current state. Her parents and two of her sisters were present at the hospital, which suggests they received the news after the hospital's attempts to contact me failed. Given the circumstances, Sue would still have retained my old contact information as her emergency contact. I made it clear to her friend that I was not going to be involved in this situation anymore, stating firmly that Sue is no longer my concern. It became evident that Sue preferred to evade the emotional turmoil associated with our 23-year marriage, which she had shattered. I informed her friend that if Sue's family was there, they were in a position to assist her in sorting through the aftermath of her actions, but I emphasized that there is no remaining connection between Sue and me, we have completely severed ties. After concluding the call, I took some time to process everything. A few hours later, my sons reached out to me to confirm whether I was aware of the situation. I acknowledged my awareness but also made it clear that I wouldn't judge them if they chose to support their mother. After all, she is their mother, and they have the right to feel compassion for her. However, I personally had distanced myself from her, feeling indifferent about her current circumstances and choices. Their reactions were understandably mixed, but they ultimately respected my stance. Yet, ever since the news of her suicide attempt broke, many of her friends, who had distanced themselves from her in the past, began resurfacing, urging me to show support. They insisted that regardless of our history, I should be there for her during this challenging time. Additionally, I learned that her affair partner attempted to visit her earlier but was denied access, as he does not qualify as family. I find myself facing a barrage of pressure to visit Sue, but I feel nothing for her at this point. It has been a considerable time since I felt any emotional connection to her, and my indifference solidified during the process of seeking my own closure after her betrayal. I stand firm in my belief that I should not feel obligated to care about what she chooses to do with her life now. In fact, the depth of my feelings has transformed into resentment. She is the one who chose to be unfaithful. Engaging in a near-year-long relationship with someone significantly younger, just 5 years older than our eldest son, completely disregarding the consequences of her actions that shattered our long-standing marriage. As she now faces the repercussions of her choices, she has resorted to a highly selfish means of seeking sympathy, garnering support from those who once condemned her. This inversion of victimhood is profoundly frustrating. As I reflect on this situation, I realize how disconnected I feel from the woman I once knew intimately for over 2 decades. It is as if the years we shared have faded into a blur of disbelief at what has transpired. Yes, I recognize that the manner in which I ended our relationship may have contributed to her deteriorating mental state, but a new layer of complexity has emerged. We are left questioning whether she underwent a genuine mental breakdown that led her to attempt self-harm, or if this was a calculated move to regain sympathy from those who were openly critical of her. The collapse of our marriage, instigated by her infidelity, has somehow transformed her into the unfortunate victim in the eyes of many. It is disheartening to see her navigate this with seemingly effortless sympathy while I simultaneously bear the brunt of public scrutiny. I understand that people might perceive me as the heartless ex-husband, unwilling to exhibit compassion for someone in distress. However, it is crucial to note that her father has reached out to me, expressing his respect for my decision to keep my distance, which is a small consolation in this tumultuous time. I feel compelled to clarify my stance regarding any potential visit to Sue. The moment she chose to betray me and engaged with her lover, she forfeited any right to my concern for her welfare. Despite my calm demeanor throughout this ordeal, my emotions remain raw, and my dispassion for her continues to grow. I anticipate being judged harshly by many who may view this as a harsh perspective. However, if one were in my position, they would likely interpret her actions in a vastly different light. Some might search for my prior posts, attempting to piece together the narrative leading to her current state and assign blame for her crisis. It is implied that my actions, which included emotionally distressing tactics stemming from the pain of her betrayal, directly influenced her mental health deterioration. Perhaps I am perceived as cold-hearted, or perhaps even as a sociopath, yet I find it necessary to prioritize my own emotional health and distance myself from someone who caused me such profound pain. Arthur Fleck famously articulated the sentiment that one ultimately receives what one truly deserves. In my case, I devoted a significant portion of my life to this woman, striving to fulfill every role and meet every expectation that would make me the best husband possible in her eyes. Despite my efforts, as she has openly stated, my influence had no impact on her decision to betray our marriage vows. Her choice to engage in infidelity stemmed from her own selfish desires, a self-centeredness that appears to have no limits. Consequently, I find a strange sense of relief in freeing myself from the emotional turmoil she created. If that makes me the villain in this narrative, so be it. I am resolute in my convictions. Her betrayal necessitates my choice to prioritize myself from this point forward. She made the decision to prioritize her own needs above the sanctity of our marriage, and now I must reclaim my autonomy. I am indifferent to her suffering. She can face the consequences of her choices without my compassion. My obligation to care about her well-being ceased the moment we finalized our separation agreement. This release of pent-up emotions is necessary for me, and if anyone is quick to judge my feelings, I urge them to keep their opinions to themselves. After investing 23 years into our relationship and raising 2 children together, it has become painfully clear that I never truly knew her at all. I harbor no sympathy for her situation and do not anticipate ever feeling that way again. In a recent update, I received information from her father that she has transitioned from the intensive care unit to a mental health wing for further evaluation. Although she is awake and demonstrates cognitive function, her energy levels remain low. Her father conveyed that she inquired about whether I had visited her. Upon learning that I had not, her demeanor shifted noticeably, leaving her in a state of emotional withdrawal. He mentioned that he would only provide additional information if I were to ask, demonstrating his understanding of my current emotional landscape. Additionally, I have taken the step to schedule counseling for myself, with the first session set for this coming Monday. In the aftermath of my estranged wife's suicide attempt, I find myself compelled to document my thoughts here, using this platform as a therapeutic outlet. Today, contrary to everything I previously expressed regarding my intentions, I made the decision to visit Sue. She has now been out of the hospital for 4 days, and surprisingly, my daughter Nina played a pivotal role in persuading me to go see her. Nina suggested that the only way for me to begin to release the feelings of contempt I hold for Sue would be to confront those feelings directly, to see her one last time in this vulnerable state. By 6 p.m. I found myself mustering the courage to call her for the first time since serving her the separation papers. Her initial greeting lacked the warmth and joy I had known for over 2 decades. Instead, her voice came through weak and hoarse. Upon recognizing my voice, she immediately broke down in tears, requiring nearly 3 minutes to gather herself before she could even attempt to speak. Before she could articulate her thoughts, I informed her of my intent to visit within the next couple of hours, and she agreed. The journey from my new apartment in Co-op City to the place that had once been our home took about an hour to an hour and a half. I stopped briefly at a local pizzeria to grab something to eat and then continued my drive. When I arrived at around 7:47 p.m., I spotted her waiting at the door, an indication of her eagerness yet apprehension. As I approached, the toll her actions had taken on her became painfully apparent. She appeared markedly thinner, the kind of frailness that signaled serious health concerns, almost reminiscent of a character from a post-apocalyptic narrative. The first thing she attempted was to embrace me, but I halted her in her tracks, conveying without words that I was not there to provide comfort. She quickly understood and took a step back. As we entered the living room, it did not take long for her to express her desire to confess everything. She explained that living with the weight of her guilt had become unbearable, affecting every aspect of her life, especially in regard to our sons. Since the day we signed the separation agreement, she spiraled into a deep sense of remorse and agony, leading her to her desperate actions. A friend of hers, who had been alerted to her distress and reached out to me from the hospital, had been making regular visits to check on her. Her father disclosed that doctors confirmed she was close to death when found, emphasizing how critical the timing had been for her survival. During our conversation, she admitted her failures as a wife, acknowledging that her attraction to another man was wrong and recognizing that she had crossed a line by not pulling back when things were going too far. In a moment of vulnerability, she apologized for disclosing intimate aspects of our marriage and for speaking ill of me to that person, expressing disbelief that she could have become someone capable of such actions. She firmly believed in her heart and mind that she was making the right choices in our relationship, despite the turbulence that had clouded our connection. However, the moment she suspected infidelity on my part, everything changed for her. It was as if the weight of the world had crashed down upon her, and the sensation of betrayal enveloped her like a heavy fog. The suffocating reality of her perceived betrayal compelled her to escape the situation as swiftly as possible. Unfortunately, by that time, it was clear that it was far too late for any chance of reconciliation or resolution. In a moment of raw confrontation, she directly inquired about when I had stopped caring about us. I responded with brutal honesty, revealing that my indifference had solidified the night she had confronted me with such intensity, accusing me of infidelity while being well aware of her own ongoing deceit over the preceding months. In that moment, her accusations stripped her of my respect, and it only fortified my decision to move forward with a plan that I had been meticulously crafting. She recounted a poignant moment from Christmas morning, describing how elated she had felt when she first unwrapped the gift I had prepared for her. However, that joy quickly transformed into madness as she realized the weight of its significance and the extent of what I had known. The realization struck her with such force that she retreated from our shared space, unable to bear the thought of facing me again. As she frantically tried to reach out to friends and family, seeking support and answers about my whereabouts, she found herself facing unexpected hostility instead. Friends and relatives berated her for her actions, leaving her bewildered by how quickly news of her betrayal had spread. It was then that I informed her about the existence of the other binders, revealing the extent of my knowledge regarding her actions. The shock registered on her face was undeniable, as it dawned on her that the chaos she had experienced, her friends turning against her, her family's shame, and even the loss of her job, was all a consequence of my actions. The weight of that realization silenced her, and she went inward, shutting down as the gravity of her choices settled over her like a dark cloud. In the aftermath of our confrontation, I took a moment to gather myself and went to the bathroom. The state of disarray I encountered there was striking. The mirror was shattered, her skincare products lay scattered across surfaces, and the bathtub was a shadow of its former self, appearing neglected and unclean. When I returned to the living room, I found her weeping, her face buried in her hands. At that moment, I felt an utter void, no anger, no rage, and absolutely no pity. It was as if indifference had taken the place of any remnants of care I once harbored for her. Looking into her tear-streaked eyes, I realized that the opposite of love is indeed indifference. As she looked up, admitting to her monumental mistakes and expressing her confusion about our future, I pointed out that she still had her family, her friends, and our children to support her. However, I made it clear that she no longer had me, nor would she ever again. My purpose in this exchange was to provide closure, but I also emphasized that once I walked out that door, there would be no looking back. Not long after, the topic of her affair came up. She revealed that the man she had been involved with had reached out to her 2 days prior. They managed to talk for a couple of hours, but the conversation ended with her urging him to move on and start a new life without her. The remainder of their discussion consisted of her expressing regret over what she had done and questioning whether this was truly the end. I looked her straight in the eyes, without a moment's hesitation, and affirmed that it had been over for a long time, well before I had served her with divorce papers on Christmas. It felt like the right moment to depart, and words seemed unnecessary. There was nothing more to say. I left her sitting on the couch, closed the door behind me, got into my car, and drove home. As I type this at 2:56 a.m., I feel an urgent need to articulate these thoughts before they escape me. This chapter, the saga of Sue, has come to an end. My son and I are both scheduled for counseling in the coming weeks, and I am committed to moving forward with my life. My relationship with another woman is growing stronger every day, and we are maintaining discretion until the divorce is finalized. I remain active and motivated, looking forward to a future where I will be cherished and honored by someone who has quietly supported me from the sidelines for years. It is time to shift my focus towards the next phase of my life. It is likely that this will be my last post for some time, although I may return with an update once the divorce is official. I am grateful to those who have offered encouragement and well wishes throughout this ordeal. To those who have commended my revenge plan, I genuinely wish it had never come to this. Yet, if faced with the same circumstances again, would not alter a single decision I made, apart from perhaps seeking more consequences for the man involved. Lastly, to the individual who harassed me, claiming I deserved this fate because I had violated my wife, your perspective is deeply misguided. The individual who harassed me asserted that I deserved the turmoil I was facing because I supposedly raped my wife. This accusation is utterly ridiculous and unfounded. The level of delusion required to make such a statement is beyond comprehension. To that individual, I must say, forget you and your nonsensical claims. As for me, I am moving forward in my life, albeit with significant challenges ahead. To provide an update on my situation, it has been just over 2 months since I served my wife with divorce papers. It's been a month since my last update, which I previously indicated would likely be my final communication on this matter. However, considerable developments have unfolded since that post, and upon returning to this account, I was overwhelmed to see hundreds of messages and responses still pouring in. Therefore, I feel compelled to share what has been happening. Firstly, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude for the overwhelming support and kindness that I have received during this difficult time. The compassion shown to me through the Reddit community has been just as significant as the support I've found from my family. It truly means a lot to me. A primary concern for many has been regarding my youngest son, who is now 17. Just days after I last posted, he began individual counseling. I accompanied him to his first 2 sessions, and since then, he has been attending sessions on his own, going twice a week. This decision has made a noticeable positive impact on him. While he is generally doing better, I must acknowledge that his trust in relationships has been profoundly damaged. The aftermath of his experiences with infidelity, combined with the turmoil stemming from his mother's actions, cheating and her subsequent suicide attempt, has left him with a deep emotional scar that may take years, if not decades, to mend. As I learned more about his experiences, it became clear that they were even more traumatic than he initially let on. He had actually witnessed his ex-girlfriend making out with someone he had considered a friend, who had only befriended him to gain access to her. This revelation broke my heart even more, knowing that my son had to endure such betrayal during such a crucial stage in his development. As a parent, you do everything within your power to shield your children from harm, but sometimes life intervenes in ways that are simply beyond your control. He has decided to continue with individual counseling long-term, and I have reassured him that he can come to me about anything, nothing is off the table. Turning to my own counseling, it has become clear that I have been grappling with anger issues. This is somewhat surprising, as I have always considered myself to be a reserved and controlled individual. Yet, this entire experience seems to have awakened a side of me that I did not recognize, a fierceness that is difficult to contain. In my therapy sessions, I have discussed everything that has transpired, and I mean everything. When I explained to my therapist the full extent of my actions in relation to my ex, his reaction was a blend of astonishment and horror. This was not the response I anticipated. Apparently, I exhibit sociopathic tendencies when provoked, a notion that I find unsurprising given my actions and emotions during this tumultuous time. My therapy sessions are not filled with dramatic moments but are more about organizing and unpacking the chaos that has taken residence in my mind following the unraveling of my marriage. Now, regarding the significant aspect of my life, my current relationship, I find myself in awe. I never thought I would have someone as caring, empathetic, and nurturing as this woman by my side, helping me navigate this difficult period. Our bond remains strong, and despite our attempts to keep our relationship somewhat private, it has become common knowledge among our close friends. She truly understands me, she always has, dating back to our teenage years. Having experienced the pain of betrayal herself, she actively supports me as I cope with my tumultuous emotions. Our living arrangements are somewhat unconventional. We often divide our time between her home and mine. We have discussed the possibility of moving in together, but her 5-year-old daughter complicates that plan. My living space is not large enough to accommodate 3 people, and I am bound by my lease until 2022. For the time being, we alternate our stays based on her daughter's schedule. When her daughter is away with her father, I stay at my place. When she has her daughter, I am at hers. Speaking of her daughter, I have developed a deep affection for her. She has taken a liking to me, which brings me immense joy. It's challenging to articulate the depth of that connection and the happiness it brings me amidst the chaos of my life. Finding the right words to convey the profound significance that Na has held in my life throughout this tumultuous period proves to be a challenging task. For those who may not be familiar with the details of my previous entries, it is essential to note that Na has harbored feelings for me since we were both sophomores in high school. Back then, she was what one might refer to as an ugly duckling, a young woman who, despite her feelings, believed she had no chance with someone like me. I went on to pursue a relationship, eventually marrying my ex-wife, Sue, while Na quietly observed from the sidelines, fully aware of her own emotions. For over 25 years, she kept this secret close to her heart, all the while watching me navigate my relationship with Sue, which was far from perfect. It wasn't until a week after my divorce hearing that we finally had the opportunity to meet for a meal, at which point Na decided to lay everything on the table. In many ways, I consider myself fortunate to have Na in my life. Our conversations constantly revolve around what the future may hold for us. Given that we have both endured the pain and disappointment that can come with marriage, we have come to a mutual understanding that we are not inclined to pursue that route again. However, we have discussed the possibility of a civil union, a path we may consider taking in the future. For now, we are content with the assurance that we are meant for each other. On the topic of my soon-to-be ex-wife, Sue, I must state that there is little to report. After our final conversation, during which she made a desperate attempt to take her own life, I made the decision to cut off all contact with her. I have no idea how she is doing now, nor do I have any desire to find out. As far as I am concerned, she is a ghost from my past, and I prefer to keep it that way. Life continues on, and as I sit here writing this on March 2nd, there is just one more month left until the filing is finalized. By this time next month, I will officially be a free man, and I am counting down the days to when I can truly embark on the next chapter of my life. It is important to clarify a previous statement regarding my mental health. I mistakenly claimed that I had been clinically diagnosed as a sociopath. My therapist had only pointed out that I display sociopathic tendencies when provoked. This was not a formal diagnosis but merely his professional observation. Additionally, I want to assure everyone that my oldest son, now 22, has no actual intent to harm anyone despite his previous remarks made from a place of anger. As for recent developments, I want to share the news that on April 13th, just a month ago, I officially became divorced from Sue. Initially, my lawyer informed me that the proceedings would be finalized on the 18th, but due to the gradual reopening of New York City and a decrease in COVID-19 cases, the timeline was expedited. On April 12th, my lawyer, Jeff, contacted me and asked me to come in the following day. When I arrived, he presented me with the finalization notice and we shook hands. However, that moment felt too significant to simply leave it at that, so I embraced him in gratitude for all he had done to help me during this difficult time. On my way home, my mind raced through countless memories from the past 24 years. The weight of all those experiences settled heavily upon me. Upon entering my apartment, the floodgates opened, and I found myself overwhelmed with emotion. I hit the floor, and tears that had been pent up for so long streamed down my face. It was cathartic. This was not sorrowful weeping, but rather the release of a soul that felt liberated from a long, dark imprisonment. That evening, I reached out to my son, the 22-year-old, keeping the conversation brief as I informed him that my divorce from his mother was finalized. He could sense the emotional upheaval in my voice and asked how I was feeling. I reassured him that I was fine. Next, I spoke with my younger son, who is 17. Our conversation lasted nearly 90 minutes, during which I learned about how he and his older brother have been supporting each other. Both of them continue to attend therapy, working through the challenges presented by our family's dynamics. While I won't delve into the specifics of our discussion, it's clear that there is still much healing to be done, particularly regarding his view of relationships. Later that night, Na arrived as she often does, and I shared the news with her. She embraced me tightly, offering her warmth and support as I once again struggled to contain my tears. Once I composed myself, Na expressed her unwavering commitment to me, assuring me that she would never betray my trust and that her love for me is genuine and profound. I am fully aware that her words carry true weight, and I appreciate her loyalty and love as we navigate this new chapter together. I do not harbor any regrets regarding the life I have constructed alongside Sue, despite the challenges that arose during our time together. Our relationship, while fraught with difficulties, afforded me two remarkable sons who have become a significant part of my life. However, a realization has settled within me: I chose the wrong partner. Over the course of the last 4.5 months, I have encountered someone who has given so much to me while asking for nothing in return. This individual's only request is for my presence and support in her life, which I find both refreshing and meaningful. I do not wish to expend too much time discussing her, but I feel a deep admiration for her. She has become my hero. Following the finalization of my divorce, a series of unexpected events transpired. Notably, I received a message from the individual who played a role in my marriage's unraveling, a person I refer to as POS. He reached out to me through Reddit after seeing the narrative surrounding my situation gain traction on YouTube. Upon recognizing the story, he decided to contact me, and while I understand the temptation to divulge his Reddit username, I will refrain from doing so out of consideration for my children, who have already endured enough pain. In his message, he initiated the conversation with an apology, acknowledging his part in the turmoil that unfolded. He provided me with an update regarding the repercussions stemming from the binder I had sent to his mother, which had significant consequences for him. It appears that his mother, a deeply devout Catholic who adheres to her faith vigilantly, was enraged upon learning that her son had contributed to the disintegration of a marriage that had lasted nearly 25 years. Her reaction was immediate: she expelled him from their home that very day. Subsequently, when his employer received the information contained in the binder, it led to his termination, leaving him without a place to stay and scrambling to secure alternative employment. Interestingly, this individual expressed a desire to connect with me on social media, despite having previously blocked me during his relationship with Sue. He conveyed a sense of fear, admitting that he worried I would locate him again if I could find him once. While I recognize that I could have chosen a more aggressive approach in addressing his actions, I opted to take a different route. I inquired about the last time he had seen Sue. He informed me that he had not had any contact with her for several months. The last time they spoke, Sue had told him to forget about her and to move forward with his life, a sentiment I also recall hearing from her during our last interaction. At the very least, this indicated that she hadn't lied about her feelings. As the conversation continued, I found him surprisingly open and transparent. It seemed that he was seeking some form of absolution for the chaos he had inflicted upon himself. Much of what he shared verified information I had already gathered through text messages and documentation, which added a layer of credibility to our dialogue. I refrained from responding extensively, I merely posed questions, and he provided answers. This back and forth lasted for about 20 minutes until he reiterated his apologies. At that point, I decided to deliver a rather pointed message, which I had prepared in advance. I informed him that he was a 27-year-old man facing the harsh reality of living with the knowledge that his own mother now detests him for dismantling a marriage that had endured almost as long as he had been alive. I acknowledged that his decision to reach out was a reflection of the guilt consuming him. However, I made it clear that I would not grant him the closure he sought. I shared with him that at my age, I was focused on building a legacy while he found himself homeless, jobless, and branded as a homewrecker. I cautioned him that if he were wise, he would learn from this experience, otherwise, he would remain a failure well into his later years, should he even live that long. I concluded by stating that luck was not what he needed, rather, it was imperative for him to get his life together. With that, I ended the conversation and blocked him, knowing that this likely wasn't the closure he had been hoping for. Yet, I believed my words would linger in his mind long after we ceased communication. On a more positive note, a significant development occurred. As of May 4, 2021, my relationship with Nina has evolved considerably. Over the past 2 months, we have engaged in substantial discussions about the future and where we envision our lives headed together. Nina has made it clear that she has no intention of being with anyone other than me. She has expressed her desire to take on my last name and has articulated her wish for me to adopt her daughter, whom we will refer to as Anna. I have previously mentioned how much I cherish this child. She is now 6 years old and recently celebrated her birthday. Anna looks up to me as a father figure, a role I am honored to fulfill, especially since her biological father distanced himself from their lives when she was only 4. Nina has consistently chosen not to introduce any other men into Anna's life, demonstrating her commitment to fostering a stable and loving environment for her daughter. Since her divorce, Anna's life has evolved in significant ways, marked by a newfound partnership that brings stability and happiness. The importance of having individuals in one's life who possess staying power cannot be overstated. I have that staying power alongside the experience of raising children. Anna and her older brother, whom I'll refer to as 17, share a relationship that is both remarkable and heartwarming. They truly are like 2 peas in a pod. The sibling dynamic they exhibit is a blend of tenderness and protectiveness that is stunning to witness. 17 has become notably attached to Anna, taking on a role that involves a certain amount of guardianship and care. Discussing this connection with my therapist revealed that it is indeed a positive sign. It suggests that 17 sees a sense of innocence in Anna, and he feels a natural desire to protect her, especially considering his own experiences that have eroded his own innocence. This realization prompted us to take a significant step in our relationship. Last Monday, we decided to go to City Hall to make our bond official. The process to obtain a marriage license was relatively quick, taking just 24 hours, and the way we revealed this news was unexpectedly low-key. When we shared the news, it felt like a foregone conclusion to everyone involved. Big Sis even joked about placing bets on when we would announce that we were expecting a child. We had believed we were managing to keep our relationship under wraps for several months, but it turned out that most people had already figured it out. This revelation evoked a sense of humor from our friends about how transparent we had been without realizing it. In the face of some potential criticism, particularly from those who would claim our decision to marry was premature, I reflect on past comments where I stated that I would never marry again. Those sentiments were expressed before I fully grasped the true depth of the connection that has developed between Nina and me. She has openly declared her unwavering and unconditional love for me, expressing her happiness in such a sincere way that it has left a lasting impression. In moments of vulnerability, she has laid in my arms, tears streaming down her face, professing how fortunate she feels to finally have a chance to be with me. Nina has shared her feelings about me over the past 25 years, recounting how even during her marriage, she often thought about the life she envisioned with me, lamenting the idea that someone else had, 1. I was completely unaware of how deep her feelings ran for so long. She even mentioned that there were times when the thought of having an affair with me crossed her mind, but she ultimately could not bring herself to pursue that path. Through all these years, Nina has offered me an abundance of love while asking for very little in return. Surprisingly, the previous person I married and with whom I had 2 children never displayed the same level of devotion to me that Nina has shown. It would be foolish to disregard the depth of love that exists between us, so it is only fitting that she now carries my name. Now that we are married, we are also undergoing the initial stages of paperwork for me to adopt Anna. As for my ex-spouse, Sue, I have not had any communication with her since my last visit to our former marital home, which was nearly 4 months ago. Mutual friends, those who remain in our lives, occasionally provide updates about her situation. Through one realtor friend, I learned that Sue has sold our house and is now working as a clerical assistant in his firm. As part of this arrangement, he has waived certain support payments I had been obligated to provide due to her unemployment. Currently, she resides in a small apartment situated near his office, which he also helped her secure. The latest updates reveal that while she is functioning, she appears to be a mere shadow of the person she once was. Reports indicate that she has struggled with her weight and tends to isolate herself, only engaging in work without building social connections, most likely to avoid the environments where her previous indiscretions transpired. The last time I received news about her was at the end of March, when I expressed gratitude to the friend for keeping an eye on her, but I made it clear that I did not wish to receive any further updates. She is no longer my concern. As 17 approaches adulthood, I find no reason to engage with Sue again. I have moved on. My journey marked by betrayal, revenge, and immense mental suffering has reached its conclusion. While I remain open to questions and a few comments, my intention is to step back into a quieter life alongside my new wife and her young child. To the many individuals who have offered me advice, well wishes, and encouragement throughout this tumultuous experience, I express my heartfelt thanks. The opportunity to share my story has not only been a source of humility but also a blessing, especially as it resonates with others in navigating the challenging waters of infidelity. Additionally, the friendships I have formed in this community have surpassed my expectations, providing a sense of camaraderie in a space where negativity often prevails.